Hello and welcome to the VBAC Home Birth Stories podcast. My name is Ashley Winning and I'm the founder of the Motherhood Circle and the creator of the Journey into Motherhood program. Are you wanting to learn more about vaginal birth after cesarean section and find your confidence to birth the way you feel is the best and safest for you and your baby? Spending too much time worrying about the what ifs and questioning if your body is capable of vaginal birth? Well, that's about to change. This podcast is for women wanting to learn about VBACs, especially home births, and for professionals who want to learn more about how to support VBAC women home birthing. Nothing is off the table. I invite you to connect with yourself, find your own voice and strength to create this pregnancy, birth, and motherhood experience you desire. You totally deserve this. If we haven't met before, let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm a mother of two, I'm a doula, a motherhood guide, and have had 2 unplanned and unneeded cesarean sections. And I'm planning my first home and vaginal birth, so it'll be a home birth after 2 cesareans. I'm here to support you along your journey to discover and create your positive pregnancy, birth, and motherhood story. So feel free to reach out at any time if you want support. Now let's get started. Hey, me again. I just wanted to let you know that I've just created a brand new Facebook group called VBAC Home Birth Support Group, where you can connect with other like-minded mothers who are looking to have a VBAC home birth as well. You can find the link in the show notes and I look forward to seeing you there. Hi, Sasha. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm really excited to hear your 3 birth stories and your home birth story in rural New South Wales, and also to hear about these big babies. I'll put it in inverted commas because they're not huge, but they're, they're healthy size. So
yeah.
Welcome to the podcast. Please let us know about yourself.
Hi. So I'm a 37-year-old girl living on a rural property in country New South Wales. I grew up out here and I love it out here and it's very much home. I didn't fall pregnant here though. I had moved away for my 20s and ended up living in London, which is where I met my Irish fantastic life partner husband, and that's where we fell pregnant. So it was a little bit unexpected, or just a little bit out of our sort of planned timing, maybe a year before we would really think about doing that, but it was the most wonderful surprise, and we were both over the moon with that.
That's really exciting. So I was going to say, where did you end up birthing that baby?
Oh, so we spent the first half of that pregnancy in London because we were both working at the time, and I needed to work out that sort of period of my job there. All the while we were desperately crossing our fingers and toes that my husband's visa would come through to emigrate to Australia with me. We had already put that plan in motion, thank goodness, prior to falling pregnant. And then we came back to Australia when I was about 30 weeks. So we had the first part of the kind of prenatal care in London, which was just very basic and on the NHS, but, great nonetheless, non-eventful scans and we got all the pamphlets and things about what happens with your baby, but then we knew we'd really have to sort of knuckle down with the last bit of prenatal care once we got back to Australia. So we came back to my hometown, which is a tiny village near a bigger sort of town called Bathurst, onto the property where I grew up and where we planned to then live and take over the family rural business from my parents and settle in to have our family. So that business is a horse riding holiday property, which I guess is sort of relevant to later parts of my birth stories. And we sort of landed and moved back here, and we'd come from winter back to summer, and big tummy and big dreams and full of excitement and everything about what was to come. I had a great pregnancy. I was, a bit morning sick in the first trimester, but that passed literally on the day that it said you would on Google.
Wow, lucky.
Lucky for me. Yeah, I know others aren't so lucky. And I was just so busy in my job in London that pregnancy was just, happening whilst everything else happened. And then getting back to Australia in summer, I guess I sort of was really keen to immerse myself in the tasks on the country property and prove that even though I was pregnant, it didn't matter. I was still capable and fit and able to do things, and help very quickly build our living quarters where we were to settle as a family, because we didn't have somewhere to live on the property then. So in the last 10 weeks of that pregnancy, I was helping my husband convert a garden shed into our new home, and making the trips in and out of Bathurst, which was our nearest major town, which is where my prenatal care was, to see my GP and, tick all of those boxes. So I was very much by the book. With the prenatal care, I found a GP who was renowned in my town for being the guy he was also an obstetrician at the hospital. So I felt very lucky to get my appointments with him, and everything seemed great, and baby was, doing all the right things, blood pressure good, healthy, tick, tick, tick. And busy at home. I probably was the least fit for this pregnancy, only because I'd come from an office job in London. But I was, helping lifting building materials and painting and moving furniture into our home and everything towards the end of the pregnancy. It was probably at about 37 weeks that my GP first asked me, and how do you envisage the birth? How are you feeling about the birth? And I was very confident in sort of saying, oh, I'm really looking forward to a natural birth, and I hope to be as active as possible. And he said, oh, just don't get too latched onto that idea, because your baby's, he's a decent, I didn't know the sex, your baby's a decent size. And that was the first time any sort of doubt had been, thrown my way, and I very much brushed it off, because physicality has always been my thing growing up. I'm a small person. I'm tiny in height. I'm 5 foot nothing. And, people have sort of joked about my tiny size my whole life, but it's never been a thing for me, because I've always also been very strong and have ridden and trained horses, and I can lift with the best of, best of them. So
I can relate. I'm a 5'1". So
okay.
Human leaning post, I was called, HLP. I think there's something special about us shorties.
I hear you, sister. I hear you. So in my head, like, the whole C-section thing was something that happened to other people, because I've always, I guess, succeeded physically. Yeah. And so that was going to be automatic for me. I also grew up with quite an open household. My parents, my mum particularly, was always very open about sex and bodies and things like that. And she, from a young age, I can remember talking about how fast my sister and I were both born, and how easily we were both born. I was, her first baby, and maybe I think a 6-hour start to finish, and my sister was 3 hours, and she was a big baby as well. So
deja vu to me. I had the same situation. I was a 7-hour and my sister was a 2. natural vaginal, no problems,
Yep.
that's how it happens.
Yeah, exactly. So, and very matter of fact, we're a farming family, so you only go to hospital if your limb is literally severed off and it needs reattaching, but no other things do you go to hospital for, or you're just making a fuss. And so, to imagine that I would be somebody that found birth difficult or labour difficult never crossed my mind. And I was reading, someone had lent me their Ina May Gaskin book, and I was reading that in the weeks before and just totally vibing it and loving it, and just planning how beautiful the birth was going to be, and lots of talk with my husband about the music we were going to play, and I had the lavender oil, and he was really involved and just listening and excited with me about the birth. There was no concern. Then as that time drew closer, we had, that's right. So my husband's Irish and his brother also lives in Australia, and they had a baby 3 months prior to us, their first child. And so my in-laws were desperate to make a trip out to Australia to see that baby before he got too old, and obviously to dovetail it in with meeting our first baby. I don't know who allowed them to book their tickets, but they literally were due here on the date, like the due date of my baby, and I was a bit upset about that.
Yeah.
I felt, it was our time, and I guess I felt it was going to be a bit hijacked by the we would naturally be excited to see them, and also the thing of, knowing we would be hosting in a way, and just that it wasn't our special time. So that was coming towards us at the same time as the birth, and my husband was naturally also a little bit anxious about that because he'd emigrated and they would be seeing his new home and his new world for the first time. And so there was that little bit of, complexity happening. The relevance of that is our due date came and went, and that was okay. And then we sort of, went in for our post-due date checkups, and my GP at that point started suggesting, we should maybe try some stretch and sweeps because that might help things move along with your big baby. And I was sort of like, yep, okay, you're a bit impatient at that time, aren't you? When you sort of, I'd not done any of the reading about waiting and that kind of thing. Why would I? It wasn't going to be a problem anyway. And so I had a stretch and sweep, and that gave me a little bit of bleeding, but nothing else. And then the parents arrived onto our property, and so that sort of trip commenced as well, side by side with the waiting. And so I had and when's your next doctor's appointment, and are they going to induce you, and all of that stuff. And I was like, oh no, I'm not talking about that yet. And then we had to start talking at the doctors about, they'll want to induce you at 10 days over. That's how far they'll let you go. And I was at that point like, oh, okay, well, that's still a few days away. It's going to happen before then, so I don't really need to think about that. And then the day before that, at one of our kind of regular checkups, I think we were going into Bathurst, the 45-minute drive every second day. I started different languages being spoken to me from various midwives. I mean, some would come in and be very much, what do you want? And it's all going to happen, and don't worry. And then I'd have people say, like, we all know it if we've been down this road. The doctor's only saying it because you're risking the death of your baby if you go over time. And, quite coldly, quite kind of in a condescending way, like, why was I questioning that? Because I had started to say, do I have to do it at 10 days? And
What
When
did
you,
they say? They, instead of saying no, you don't have to, they said, oh, you don't have to do anything, but you know, you're risking your baby's going to die.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
right. I mean, we can't force you to do anything, but it's there for a reason. And
Yeah.
if you don't do that, then you're taking that risk. That's the risk you're taking.
Rather than sitting down and talking to you about the actual numbers and the actual risks without prejudice or bias.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There was a few midwives though, because I was obviously quite teary at that time and just, on the precipice of,
Yeah, of course.
as you are at the end of pregnancy. And some midwives, and I remember their faces to these days, would sit down with me and say, you don't have to do anything. And it was almost like they were secretly telling me that they couldn't get overheard by other staff in the hospital because they were not talking the mainstream line. And then, I did a bit of Googling and sort of did say, right, well, actually, do you know what? I'm not going to do it at 10 days over. I'm going to wait for another couple of days and see if my body does this naturally. To which, of course, I got no opposition because they can't force you. They sort of, knew I was going home and they couldn't arrest me or whatever. And so I was like, oh, okay. All it took was for me to just say what I'm doing and okay. So I went home back to the property, and it was on then the evening before the 12 days over, knowing that I was booked to go in there at 7 a.m. the next day, and all the family was with us, the in-laws plus my parents still live on this property, although separate from us. So there was this big dinner sit down thing, of which I'd done all the cooking because I just wanted to be in my own zone in the kitchen while everyone else was chatting outside, and sat down at this big raucous Irish talkative family dinner table. My family's very talkative as well, and I was just in a different planet. I was like, it was happening around me. And then I went and had a shower before bed, and as I was hopping out of the shower, my waters broke, and it was happening. It was happening on its own, and it was the most exciting moment. And so I told my husband, and then word got around and everyone knew, and, left us to ourselves. And we went down into our little house and phoned the hospital, and they said, oh, it's early, so just try and get some rest and see how it goes and everything. And so we did. We lay down together for a while. This is at about 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. And the contractions did start to come in sort of waves, maybe every 4 minutes. And in the back of my mind, I'd remembered that at the hospital, we'd done a tour, and there were like 3 good rooms and 2 really not good rooms. And I started to think, what if we get there late and like all the good rooms have gone and we get the bad rooms? Maybe we should go, That was my sort of the only thing that could go wrong in what was ahead of us, thinking at the time. So we phoned again, said they're a bit closer. We've got a long drive ahead of us with kangaroos on the road and all sorts of obstacles and things. And they're like, okay, come in. So we bundled into the car and did the drive in, and music on and breathing, and everything was really quite okay then, just sort of regular surges and nothing too terrible. Got up into the birthing suite, and I had done a birth plan, natural, husband very involved. I'd like to be able to move around and play music and use the shower as much as possible. And they, the midwife took that and went, great. Well, that's how we love to do things as well. And kind of left us to it, which was great. The contractions were coming pretty heavily then, and they were really knocking me around. And I was, as you would know, they're not a joke. And bigger than you imagine in your imaginings when you don't know what one feels like. At the monitoring, it was just happening with a with a Doppler, and for the first while, and then we went like that for about 6 hours, and I was really kind of using my techniques of rocking and being in different positions and getting in and out of the bath, in the bathroom, and nothing was really helping. I hadn't really found a rhythm, and in fact my contractions weren't rhythmic either. They were quite intense contractions according to the monitor, and they weren't regular. So they were coming like sometimes 4 minutes apart, and then sometimes, 6 straight in a row, one off the back of the other. So I wasn't able to find a rhythm, and I wasn't able to kind of, rest in between and then plan for the contraction. We had a doctor come and see me twice, and just sort of observe, and then we were approaching morning at this point, and the midwife had been internally examining me throughout, and I hadn't really dilated very much. And then in the morning, my GP, who was also the obstetrician at the hospital, he came in to see me. I was quite exhausted at this point, and he examined, and I was only 4 centimetres, and the description of that was disappointingly only 4 centimetres. And so I was like, oh gosh, I'm not doing this right. This isn't happening how I thought it would be happening. And obviously exhausted with the pain, and maybe with my first birth I'd been too active at the beginnings, and doing too much squatting and moving and whatever, and exhausting myself on top of what was a long game ahead of me. So he said, well, we can maybe give you an epidural, which will then allow you to relax and then allow your body to start to dilate and save your energy for pushing. And at that point, when someone offers you to take the pain away, you kind of like, yeah, there was no question from me. I was like, that sounds brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then he was like, oh, but actually there's been a car accident somewhere, a small country rural hospital, so our anaesthetist is busy, so it's going to be a while before you can have that epidural. So it was like, here you go, I'm going to take this pain away, and then, oh, but you have to go through this for, it was just like, no, I need it now. Now you've said it, now I've agreed to it, I need it now. So that's when he said, well, there is an injection I can give you for the meantime, and that was pethidine. So I was like, yep, whatever, just give it to me, yeah. And so I had that injection. I don't really recall it kind of taking a lot of the pain away, but it definitely altered me a little bit. And then the anaesthetist eventually came in, and we did that. And I remember that being quite tricky because of needing to move but having to be still while they got that special needle in my back. And just I remember that sort of bit amongst the haze. Then, of course, the epidural kicked in, and I was comfortable. And we actually went through a phase of being like, okay, now I can breathe, and now I can think, and now I can relax, and now we can look ahead to the journey ahead with this labour. I ate a sandwich. My husband had a bit of a relax as well. We kind of got the music sorted out again, and the chaos went away for a moment. Everything was calm, and I was comfortable. And then I was able to kind of feel my legs a little bit, and I'd said that to the midwives, and they were like, well, that's great. Do you think we'd be able to get you over and on all fours? So I got on all fours, and that was great. And then I could feel not a lot of pain, but I could feel a lot of pressure. And there was a point where something happened, something moved, and I started to feel productive. I started to feel like the pressure was right, like it was in the right place, and I was getting a rhythm, and I was moving with the contractions rather than against the contractions. And my husband was just totally in sync with me, predicting my every need, bringing me my, cold cloth exactly before I even said that I needed it, and changing the song before I even said that I needed that to happen. And everything was just right. And the midwives, one after the other, because it was a long time, I was probably at about 18 hours by this point, and I'd met quite a few midwives at this point, and everyone was just lovely person after lovely person, and just so supportive and excited that it's going to start to happen now. It's here we go. And I was dilating, and then I remember this doctor came in, and I hadn't met him before. My doctor must have gone and changed shifts, and he came in, and he was like, "Can we get some lights on in here?" And I was like, "Do we have to?" He's like, "Yeah, no, I can't do this examination without lights." So lights went on. "Can you just flip over for me?" And then I was like, "Can I stay like this?" "No, I can't." So I had to move for him. And then he examined me, and he's like, 8 centimeters. "No, we'd expect you to be more by now. Look, I'll give you another hour, and in that time, we'll see where you get to. But, this is quite a long time now." So I got back over into my all fours position, and I heard my midwives then out in the corridor sort of, there was conversations going on there was conflicting conversation. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear that people weren't agreeing with each other in the corridor. Kept going, baby's heart rate. Meanwhile, I haven't even mentioned that, fine throughout all of this. I resumed that same feeling of good contractions. I was groaning and moaning through those contractions, but it felt right. It felt good. I could feel the pressure in my bum. I could feel things happening. There was a little bit of blood stain coming through in the catheter. And we were doing that hour, and I felt like we'd had a really productive hour. Anyway, that doctor then came back in after this hour and again flipped me over, examined me, and was like, "No, we're only 9.5 centimeters. This is..."
9.5?
Yeah.
So you
only 9.5. Yeah.
Like, come on.
And this just isn't going to happen. I think we're going to have to call this.
Because you haven't shown enough progress, but you've made progress.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And then I heard really heated kind of arguing in the corridor with the doctor and the midwives. And so they were obviously like, let her go. And he was, nah. And then I heard that there was a backup. We've got 3 more to do tonight. If we don't do her now, we won't get through the backlog of women needing their babies cut out of them. He didn't say that. I'm adding that bit at the end.
So sad.
He did say, yeah, if
and
we don't do
nice
this now.
That the midwives were fighting and defending you. Like, it sounds like you had amazing midwives that were supporting you.
They just are. They're just the most amazing type of human in the world, I think. So came in, sort of told me this was what was going to happen. And at that point, actually at the point where he'd said you're only 9.5, like failure sort of language, was when the wind went out of my sails. And I was just, because I had been up for that day before and then cooked the big feast for the family, and then labour had started. And then, so I didn't have a night's rest before. And then I'd done the 20 hours at this point, or 22 hours on top of a day of being awake. So it didn't take much to just knock me off my perch. And I was like, okay. And then just cried, and my husband cried with me. And so they started prepping me for theatre. So it's a bit of a like bungle. You can sort of feel the fact that the hospital is short-staffed or in a bit of a pickle at this stage, with just random people doing random things to me, like, you know, getting the catheter hooked up to the special bed, the wheelie bed that can move through the corridors, and bang, 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 and pushing me out. And I remember they crashed the bed into a wall. And the catheter bag fell off, and like I had to catch it. Like there was just so many different people. But my husband was with me, and he was sort of my constant person, like the only one that hadn't changed over.
Such an emotional, raw time.
Yeah, it is.
And I think most of us who have been through this can totally relate. You know what it's like. It's really hard to explain it to other people, but I definitely felt the same.
Yeah.
Horrible.
It's just, and I don't know how, when all of those professionals who would deal with these similar emotions and similar situations day in, day out, wouldn't know that sensitivity is so important. And a woman in labour who's just been told she has to do this now, or she's risking her baby and she's already just at the end of her rope.
Yeah.
And, you know, why they wouldn't be as nurturing time. Anyway, so pushed down the corridor into that room, and that was when they said my husband had to leave. What I think must be when they administer the actual anaesthetic. Not anaesthetic, it's the spinal block. And I can't remember if that was the nice one or... Yeah, that was the... And again, he wasn't particularly nice or warm or anything. And my husband came in, and I was numb up to my mouth, and I started to panic because I couldn't move my body, and I just needed him there. And he would just hold my head, and then his touch on my forehead, I just focused all my energy on the feeling of him touching my forehead, because that was feeling like, gosh, I just can't imagine what it's like to be in an accident where you get paralyzed, and that's your, terrifying. Anyway, so, and then pushed into theatre, and then busy theatre, talking to each other, not talking to me. Let's do this. You can feel your body moving, and it's, you know, as they're kind of manipulating it on the table, and then pulled out my baby, or before you knew it, it was so quick, and it was a boy. And we didn't know what sex he would be, and so that was a huge moment for us. And my husband held him, and then he was crying, and then they lay him next to me, as they do, and just my face touching his face, and he stopped crying, and it was just the most amazing feeling, and everything else just went away at that point. And it was wonderful, and stitched me up, and he was healthy. My baby was healthy and big, and always big, and he was 4.5 kilos and thriving. And then we went through into recovery, and he was with me, and he fed straight away, and that was great. Easy, and he was like a vacuum cleaner. I was like, God almighty, this is God, they really do know how to do it straight away, don't they? And it wasn't until I had other babies that I went, no, he was something else. Feeding was his thing. And then I had that high, that adrenaline rush, and everything was wonderful, although I was really groggy because I'd had all of the drugs, and they said, oh, we might take him off you because you've had too many drugs. And then they're like, oh no, actually, if your husband can stay in the room with you, then you're right to keep him. And I was like, I couldn't imagine anything else. Like, you could not take him away. So we spent the next few days in hospital with him stuck to me and feeding and doing everything right. And then those first moments of standing up and realizing just how much had happened inside and outside of my body, and that feeling of just, God, being sawn in two in the middle. It's pretty special. But, you know, all of that didn't matter because we had Billy. Billy was the name of my first baby, and feeding was great, and he was putting on weight as they wanted him to. So we spent that 4 days in hospital, and that was really nice. They let my husband stay in the same room as me for that whole time. And he got varying degrees of treatment as well. I know the woman does it all, but I think the man goes through an incredible time as well. I mean, he becomes a father in that moment, and it's quite common, I think, for people to kind of brush aside the man because he hasn't physically birthed the child, but a lot has happened to him. He's watched the person he loves go through this. He's been there. If he has, you know, my husband was so involved from the start to the finish, the emotional roller coaster of him also feeling like he was going to lose his baby and his wife and everything all at once and all of that stuff. And so that, yeah, some of the people were a bit kind of, why are you resting in this room with your wife? Why, you know, or not feeding him, and just, he got a bit brushed aside. And I just remember feeling that he was amazing as well. Like,
absolutely. You know, and I think if we give the partners the tools, the resources, and the encouragement, then they can be better support partners to us as women. They need encouragement and love and support just as much as we do. Their parents as well. And my husband had the same sort of treatment in hospital. You know, some of the midwives were like, would, you know, be very loud in the room because he was sleeping, but he was in the room getting the baby for me so I could feed the baby, looking after me, so they didn't have to do that. And without him, I wasn't getting half the support that I need. Exactly. He was doing everything for me.
And that was magical time for us. And, you know, he changed my pads, he did like they do all of that, you know. And I think it should be like they support the man to support the woman kind of thing, because at the end of the day, you're going home together, you know what I mean? Absolutely. Absolutely. They should, that is empowering and equipping them to then, you know, be the best that they can. So, before we left to get discharged, the cesareaning doctor came in and said, so that was a big baby. You wouldn't have done that. And are you planning on having any more children? Of course you are. There'll be cesareans as well. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm too in the baby bubble and happy, and thanks, bye. You know, you kind of like you treat doctors like celebrities. You kind of think they're so important, and you're like, oh, thank you. I think I thanked him heaps. Like, thank you so much. Thank you. Wish I could find him now, go back to him and say, you know what? Fuck you. That's actually what I meant.
And you're so vulnerable because you're in their territory. You know, they're the bosses of they're the leaders and the bosses of that environment. But if they're in your home, you know, it'd be a bit different. And if you'd had, you know, a couple of years under your belt and experience, but you're so vulnerable, especially as a first-time mom, and after no sleep, learning how to do this, you're relying on them to look after you, care for you, you know, you're just reliant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, went home, and then all good, fed well, healthy, happy baby, great. And you kind of have to kind of listen then to all the people being like, oh wow, just as well, lucky for the doctors, and at least you had a healthy baby, that's all that matters. And you know, all of that shit that people just say to you because it's just habit, because they've heard other people say it. I don't even think they think about the words really. It's just what we say.
And people are trying to be supportive, you know, they want you to feel healed and happy and just move on from it. So they're trying to force.
Look at the positives, like look on the bright side is the sentiment. It's not
feels helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel helpful for the mum when she wants to cry and, you know, talk about it.
And I had like, you know, because I'd already defied the whole not getting induced at 10 days thing, and they let you go over that whole thing. And so, you know, in the back I was like, oh, there's all these people and they must think that, you know, I was so cocky about being able to do it and make my own choices, and then it ended this way. And I know that doesn't matter, but at the time you're like, oh, just anyway. So that was that, and I really didn't think about it a lot after then, because you just get too busy with new life with your baby. I think I had a pretty regular recovery. For the first 2 weeks, it was pretty horrific, just that not being able to sit up. And that's the main thing you always need to do, isn't it? Sit up to feed your baby, get up to do something, and just bending up in the middle is like not fire knives. And yeah, so, but I got back into my physical life. So at 6 weeks, I got back on a horse to resume my life as a horse riding woman. We're a horse riding holiday property. So I did that with my big milky boobs, and off I went. And then,
when did you plan for your next baby, or did you,
yes.
Okay, so you planned for your next baby, and how many months apart were you when you fell pregnant with your second baby?
Oh, God, don't ask me to do that maths. They're 19 months apart. The children are 19 months apart, so I guess that's what, 9 months?
Then. Yeah, about 10 months, yeah.
Yeah,
roughly.
yeah. And so we wanted to, we wanted to get pregnant, and we did. And it was like this moment of joy and fantastic, and this is so great. And then very quickly after that moment of joy, I remember sitting on my own in the afternoon, and it all just hit me like a train. And I was like, how am I going to have this baby? So I picked up the phone and I phoned the hospital. And I was put onto the head midwife, and she was quite matter of fact. And she was like, well, if you've had one cesarean, then it's likely the doctors will make you have another cesarean. And I was like, oh my God. I had heard that you don't have to have a cesarean every time, but I didn't know like what that line of can or can't was. Like, do some hospitals just shut the door and not let you in? Or, you know, is there a choice, or do you have to apply, or how does it work? Like, I'd never navigated this before. And then I was like, so your doctor's going to make you do it. And then I was just a mess, just cried and was like, I just don't want this to happen again. And then I just fell down this rabbit hole on the internet of calling various hospitals, and I think I called about as far away as you could get from where I lived. Now, I'm 45 minutes drive from the town where the hospital was that I birthed Billy, and that was their answer. And then I called, you know, as far as the Blue Mountains, and they are no VBAC, because I think they're a small hospital and whatever. And then I started to find birth experts or VBAC and just things like that. And I'd just come up against a few brick walls of like, you have no choice. You do what the hospital does. You could do it in Sydney. And I remember sort of thinking, well, how do I have a natural birth in Sydney when I can't plan when the labour will start to know when to go or whatever? Can I labour for 3 hours in the car on the way to the hospital? Like, God, this is so messy. What have I done? And then I picked up the phone and they found this local woman and who was a midwife, and phoned her and she said, "Hello, Hazel speaking." And I said, "Oh my God, she's got the nicest voice, this lovely English accent, and she just sounds like she knows what she's talking about."
Oh,
this is
Hazel, who I was speaking with recently, the VBAC researcher.
Hazel Keedle.
Yes.
Who at the time lived out near Orange, which is a bit further west. And she's like, "Tell me your story." So I told her about my first birth and she just listened. And then she was like, "Wow, I can't believe they treated you like that." And I was like, "What? Really? I thought it was just like how it happened." "No, you got to 9.5 centimeters and they said you didn't. That's outrageous. Oh my God." And then just this conversation about VBAC and yes, and anyone can do it. And there was nothing, it sounds like you just were unlucky with the people in the hospital and you got stuck in a system and the cascade of intervention that just one thing after another and no support, and you just needed more time. And it was so nice to hear that. And she was like, "Have you thought about doing a home birth?" And I was like, "Really? Like, I wouldn't have even thought that was a thing." She's like, "Yeah, I mean, none of that's, of course you can." "Am I allowed? I've had a cesarean." "Allowed? It's your body. You can do whatever you want to do."
She's very, very passionate, Hazel,
yeah.
and God love her. You know, she's doing some wonders in the world.
Isn't she just?
Yeah.
So at that point, I was like, this is the best conversation I've ever had with anyone in my entire life. Went and spoke to my husband afterwards and he was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not?" And we were like, "Well, yeah." And then, you know, we got talking to her and she's like, "Yeah, so this is what it is and what it will cost and how it will work and everything." And it was just amazing. Like, we then went through all the prenatal care with her and she'd come out to our property and we'd have cups of tea and chats and check the, you know, monitor the baby, and a lot of chats like, you know, what do you want? And this is, you know, no promises from her. This is just should be a journey that's about you and what you want. And then we need to make alternative plans for if things go another way. You know, that's as simple as it is. So we related to the hospital. We did the sort of minimum interactions with the hospital that we needed to do. And I think I had to see them as, I had to have a high risk. No, not on that one. Yeah, just a few checkups at the hospital, the scans, and the referral from the GP to see her. And I kind of had to hoodwink that GP a little bit to give me the referral. Like, I couldn't say, "I'm planning a home birth with a midwife. Can you give me a referral?" I had to say, "I live on a rural property and I need a referral so my midwife can come to me because of distance for my prenatal care." But I couldn't say it's because I want a home birth.
Nice, isn't it? That you need permission from a GP
who
to
knows
do something
nothing
that you're allowed to do It just makes no sense. But yeah,
I know.
this happens
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. Yeah. So doing that, and then, you know, we got a little bit of questioning from humans around us about, oh, home birth, really? Isn't that dangerous? Isn't that whatever? That's a bit hippie of you. And but we were just so focused on doing this, and I read so much. Like, I read every birth story on the internet about, well, natural birth story and home birth story on the internet during that pregnancy, and I was really fit during that pregnancy, and I ate really well, and I rode horses right through the pregnancy until I just couldn't anymore, and that was about 30 weeks. I didn't train horses. I didn't break horses in, but I rode horses I trusted till that point. But and I felt great, and we've got a big back veranda that's sort of surrounded by gum trees and bush, and so that was where we'd planned to have our birth pool, and it was going to be late spring due date, and so the weather would be perfect, and we could listen to the creek running below us, and just everything was going to be the opposite and amazing and beautiful. And that due date approached, and we were just super positive, and Hazel had us do like an ideal birth plan, and then what's your worst thing that you could imagine plan, like draw a picture of the worst thing that you can imagine, sort of. And the ideal birth plan was like the birth pool and both of us in the pool and just nature and wonderful. And then the worst thing was in the car, transferring to hospital, kangaroos on the road, and then a cesarean at the end, just like the other cesarean, which Hazel had been really kind of clear the whole way of, you know, not all births go to plan. You can plan as much as you want, but at the end of the day, it's up to your body and the baby and the circumstances. And, you know, we can only do what we can do, and just approach this positively and give it time and monitor the baby and be really sensible and everything. And, you know, but we had that knowledge of this could happen or this could happen. And then here is our transfer plan. If that happens, transfer is a very real part of home birth. And, you know, to plan for that is a very sensible thing to do. So if it happens, when it happens, it's not, you know, as much of a calamity in your head as it needs to be, because you've got some control, because you've made a plan for that as well.
And I think it's a legal requirement anyways for home birthing midwives to have this set up, to definitely get you to a place in an emergency situation. They have to prove that. So yeah, they'll all be done for home birthing midwives.
Yeah. So that was that. So we had the birth pool delivered, and it was set up on our back veranda, and just beautiful. It was all beautiful, and I was big. I felt really big with this pregnancy, maybe because my other body wasn't like, I was fitter, so it looked like a bigger bump or something, but it was ridiculously enormous. And 40 weeks came and went, and then I remember the next, you know, week and the days just achingly slowly trickled by day after day, and you get that feeling of it's never gonna happen, this baby's just gonna stay in forever, and labor's never gonna start. And I knew that there was a limit for the legality of home birth. Like, you'd get to a certain point and then it wasn't legal anymore. 10 days past 40 weeks came and went, and I was just a ridiculous emotional mess. And the business that my house is situated within, on the property, like, all these school kids came to start their summer camps, because we do horse riding and drama summer camps here, and I'd really hoped that it would all be over with in between those kids being here on the property. And anyway, they came, and so we were just locked away in our own little home, away from all of the action. And yeah, and then it was at exactly the same time as my last labour started. 40 weeks plus 12 days at 8 p.m. at night. And it started. And so brilliant. We're within the time frame. Fabulous. I rested on and off during that night. We phoned Hazel that night and she had a 2-hour drive to get to us. So we left her a mattress out in our lounge room and she just silently arrived in the night and got some sleep herself. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, we got up and I remember we had a cup of tea and just wandered around and everything was great. And Hazel was so excited for us. It was wonderful. And she knew walking and being in nature was a big thing for me. And so Hazel and I went for a walk together. And I remember she told me she'd just been accepted or offered this job doing her PhD and doing this study and everything, which is where she is now. And so that was a big, exciting moment for her. And that was really cool. And I just remember exactly where we were when she told us that. And of course, now she's doing such wonderful things with it. So
were you having contractions at this point, or did your water break at 8 o'clock?
No waters broke.
Okay, so your contractions had started.
So it was a different start. And I was like, great, I've got my waters intact. So it's going to be they're going to be softer contractions. They're going to be nice compared to the last ones, which I had always thought, because my waters had gone, the contractions were spikier and harder. But anyway, so I'm having contractions and they're pretty regular at this point, and we're walking around. And then the second midwife arrived, and she was this beautiful young student midwife of Hazel's. And so we, got set up in our wonderful environment, and my husband got busy filling the pool and moving around and getting in and out of the pool, and it was all great. And we spent a day labouring in the pool, and obviously it's all building in intensity. And I was quite keen for Hazel to examine me. I wanted that information. So she examined me several times throughout the day, and it was incredible. Like, she just was like, so you're 2 centimeters, and this is early in that morning after a night of gentle labor. You're 2 centimeters, and the baby's still quite high, but you're dilating, and that's fabulous. We're in a really good spot, and so let's keep doing this, and rather than, oh, you're 2 centimeters, which would just a different tone. And so labor progressed throughout the day, and I was in and out of the birth pool, and I was walking around the surrounding bushlands and, visiting my horses and really communing with nature, and like, clambering up and down some slopes and things to kind of get things moving. And the progression was happening, but slowly, but regularly. And I think by that evening I was at 6 centimeters, but my baby was still quite high. And then we started to sort of talk about, let's just try and get some rest. And she tucked my husband and I up in my bed to sort of rest and lie down and whatever. And the contractions were coming quite strong, and she did an examination, and she thought it was some meconium that she registered. And she was like, so we're getting to the point where we might need to think about taking this to a different setting, because it might just be better to be near some other monitoring, just more, sophisticated monitoring, and we can keep going, and it might be, it will give us the time that we need for your baby to drop and do what your baby needs to do. And we were like, okay, right, okay, we've got to get in the car, we've got to go. Oh, this was, just, it all happened very quickly. And I remember my husband got a bit worried at that point, and if we're going to do this drive because it's not going well, then things aren't going right. And There was just a moment. And so I'd said, I need my husband with me in the back seat. I can't sit in the car alone, and I need him to keep patting me on the back. So we phoned my mum to come and drive us, and because she's on the same property in another house. So she was with us after not too long, and then we all bundled into the car, and it was all very quick, and off we went into hospital for our transfer. We get to the hospital, and my favourite midwife greeted me. She just looks like an angel. She just has the most beaming, massive smile, long, straight hair. She was the one that told me I could question the induction in my first labour. And I was like, oh, I just remember going, oh, it's you. Oh, God, I'm so happy it's you. And then they were like, okay, so you were at home, you were having a home birth. This is great. What was your lighting like? Was it dim lighting at home? Was it this? And so they made the lighting as much like it was at home, made it quiet in the hospital room, and were just like, how can we help you as much as possible? And then we discussed the epidural. I said, well, in my last birth, I remember when I had the epidural, I got this, the relax, and then I got on top of it, and, maybe if we did that again. And so, yeah, so I had the epidural, and then we got in that. They tried to do a bit of a lighter epidural, so I still had that control of my legs and everything. And we tried to be in that position for a while, and it was just different. Like, everyone was just really kind. And I remember the lovely and really kind, like this, and is it comfortable for you to sit like that while I put this in? And her waiting between contractions to put that needle in. Whereas the other one at the previous birth was like, hurry up, you need to be in the position for me to do this. So it was just like, I felt like even though things were taking a similar path, the treatment was so different. It just felt like I was in control and I wasn't spiraling out of control. And then, they gave time and time and time. And then I think it was after about 24 hours of established labour that they went, I think we're at a point now where the baby's not descended anymore, and we can keep going, but it might not come down any further. And then you'll be more tired later to spend time with, with your new baby. And do you want to keep going, or do you want to? And then we just had tears, and we were like, no, we've tried everything we can, and it's just not happening. And so my husband was crying with me, and we were just so upset, but it wasn't a terrified upset like the last one was. It was just disappointment, but we'd made that decision. And so then they really gently took me off to theatre, and the same anaesthetist came with me and spoke to me and understood what I'd gone through with the feeling of paralysis before and the panic that happened before. And so she had ice, and she was like, we're going to put this ice on your face, and you can feel that and then concentrate on that, and that will be, she was just really understanding and walked me through what was going to happen. And then when we went into the theatre, and it was the most lovely surgeon, and he was talking to me the whole time and asking me about my other birth and our baby and everything. And it was just such a different experience. And I remember being conscious that the light outside the morning was coming, and it was just a different feeling. Like I could almost hear the birds out there rather than just hearing equipment clattering and people talking. And then he said, would you like to help with your baby? And so I was able to reach down, and they helped me, and they dropped the curtain, and I helped to pull him out. And again, he was wonderfully healthy and great, and out he came. They were like, whoa, he's a whopper. And so, yeah, and then they stitched me up, and I held him again, and we went into recovery again, and he stayed with me again the whole time, and my husband was able to come with me again the whole time, and we spent those days afterwards in hospital with him. And gosh, he was a different baby. My first one was like a needs baby, like a survival baby, like I can feed really strongly and I can sleep and whatever, and this baby just wanted to cuddle, and he was a gentle feeder, and I was like, wow, this is like a different thing. Like,
and how big was he?
He was 4.9.
4.9 kilos.
Yeah. And he, little thumper, didn't fit any of the clothes that I'd bought for him and everything. And
you were feeling a lot more positive after this experience because you had that human touch, that care and compassion that you really longed for during your first experience.
Yeah, I just wasn't made to feel like an idiot. I was respected. I was the center of what was happening rather than some annoying thing on the sideline messing up the schedule of the hospital. And it just made me feel like I'm not a person, I'm not a person that, needs a lot of cuddles or touch or anything like that. If I'm upset, I like to deal with it on my own and quite privately. I'm quite practical. I'm quite non-emotive. The fact that I've just gotten a bit choked up speaking to you is something I would never do. I'm just not that person. So but that was reefed out of me with the first one, and then in the second one I just felt more in control. That was what I needed to feel okay ultimately. And then
so with the third one, did you plan this one?
No.
Okay, so this is a surprise.
We kind of had a chat and said, maybe a third one. We live on a property, and so the more kids, the more company there is for the kids, and they're a gang rather than just two. And maybe, we were talking about later that year looking to fall pregnant, and then little did we know while we were having that conversation we were already pregnant. So
and when was this then? What was the age gap between these two?
25 months.
25-month age gap.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was just past the whatever it is, 18 months or something between cesarean, like my I think something like that.
What was your plan with this one?
Well, I was like, oh God, now what do I do? I've done two. And I called Hazel and I went, Hazel, so I have to now, right? Like I've had two cesareans. I now don't have a choice. She's like, rubbish. Of course you've got a choice. You can have a home birth if you wanted to. I was like, really? No, really? She was like, yeah, really. I mean, statistically, there is more risk with having third time major abdominal surgery than there is with having a VBAC after two cesareans. The statistics are that.
And she knows the statistics because now she's a researcher. She's had, 24 months in this new role as well. So she's probably even more passionate now.
Yeah. Like she definitely knows the statistics. She's the statistic. And I was like, wow, really? That makes so much sense. I was like, okay. So off we went again. And it was like, I was so lax this time. I didn't read as much. I was like, yeah, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, what's the worst that can happen? I know it doesn't have to be as traumatic and as terrible if we transfer again. I know that isn't the scariest thing in the world. So I'm just going to chill out, get on with it. I've got too many other bloody children right now to sit down and read as many articles indulgently like I did the last pregnancy. I'm too busy running around. So off we go. And again, non-eventful pregnancy, fit, active all the way through. And bit of a change this time. I phoned her and I said, I'm thinking about borrowing one of my friend's vacant houses in Bathurst and we could do the birth there. And she thought, I said, I think that's a great idea because, you know, we're closer to the hospital if we need to transfer, and then, you know, that can only make things easier. So it was this big, like, Federation style house with 5 bedrooms and wooden floorboards and no furniture in it. And it was like that film clip November Rain, you know, like just the flowing curtains and floorboards everywhere and bath. Like, it was perfect.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So we got the birth pool there and set up, and it was over summer again, the birth, and we had kids camps here on our property again, and I'm usually quite a big part of running those, and so I was, you know, a couple of days over 40 weeks and trying to G up the kids, a big group of kids, and everybody say good morning, I can't hear you, do it louder, good morning, wow, like coo it, just crazy mental children and horse riding and fun summer camps, and it was so frenetic and loud. And then I just went, you know what, I need to get away from this. This baby is never going to come out when I'm at this level of adrenaline and not relaxed. And so my husband and I moved into that house about, you know, at 40 weeks plus 3 days or something like that, just going, well, this one's not going to come out till 40 weeks plus 12 days or beyond that or whatever. So let's just enjoy each other's company, relax, watch crappy television, enjoy not having to look after our other 2 children, wander down go to the local pool, swim around, go to the cafe, make sure I'm always well nourished, well slept, well everything, and then we did lots of walking, and then my contractions started 9 days over, so I was like, woo, it's an early one.
Woohoo.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry, I had a meltdown that day, I forgot, and I booked an appointment at the osteopath and the acupuncturist. So I had both of those that day. It's probably important to know. And I walked into the osteopath and was sitting in a waiting room, and she'd been treating me that whole pregnancy. Actually, this is important information. She treated me that whole pregnancy. The previous pregnancy with my transfer second cesarean, I had a chiropractor, and I didn't like him from the start. He was like, yep, if you want this baby to come out naturally, then you need to come and see me twice a week, every week. And I was like, that's a lot of money. I can't afford that. So are you telling me if I don't spend this amount of money, I'm not going to succeed? Like, surely there's a middle ground. Surely not. He's like, well.
That's so weird for him to say that. I went and saw a chiropractor, and it was on my terms when I wanted to, and it was just when I was feeling it.
Yeah.
Never once said anything like that.
Yeah, and he was quite rough as well, like almost like on my side, and he'd like use his body weight to crack my back, and I was like, whoa, and he was like, whoa, what? And I'm like, I've got a baby, like, that's not right. No, I'm not like, and I'm pretty tolerant to that kind of stuff. But anyway, bad chiropractor, middle one.
What does an osteo do?
Well, an osteopath is both skeletal and muscular, and they work with both systems working together. And, you know, that's my choice, and I think they're wonderful. And I still see them for other niggly aches and pains, or, you know, misalignments and things like that. And anyway, she was wonderful, and she was a Kiwi woman, and she was like, oh, yeah, no, we'll do a bit of I can see your pelvic fascias need to be a bit more relaxed around there, so we'll just do a bit of a treatment. Yeah, you're great. I don't need to see you for another couple of months. And I was like, oh, wonderful. So I saw her maybe 3 or 4 times during the pregnancy, and she'd just give me a tune-up, she called it, and watch the baby grow and everything. And and on that morning, and I walked into the waiting room and had got a last-minute appointment, and she walked in to see me, and I just burst into tears, and she's like, oh, you are so ready. And I was like, it's never going to come out again, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, rubbish, come on, we'll do a few tweaks and toes, and I'll play with your toes and do this and that. Anyway, and then I saw the acupuncturist, and he was like, I've done a bit of releasing stuff around here, and they were so lovely and everything. Anyway, so both of those things had happened that morning. So it could have been either one, could have ticked it off, or it could have been going to happen anyway. Who knows? I'll never know. And yeah, so contractions started that morning. We went to the pool. My sister was there as well. She'd come to be a part of this birth, and my sister is younger than me. She hasn't had children and was really wanting to be a part of it and to help, and she was really on board and wonderful. And so the three of us went down to the local pool and did some swimming and laughing and teasing me. And I remember being in the spa bath, which you're not meant to be, but I was like, oh, bugger it, I'm going to be in the birth pool later anyway. So I was sitting in the spa, and all these older men got in, and because my body was underwater, they couldn't see. And it was like 10 middle-aged men, older men in there, all kind of having their man's club, talking to each other. And then I just stood and rose out of the water to get out, and they were like, oh my God, it's enormous. It was just like,
were you wearing a bikini?
Yeah,
because I know that freaks out like older generations. Like, how dare she wear a bikini?
How dare she?
And expose that belly.
Yeah. So I just remember being like, suck it up, lads. Like, deal with it.
This is beautiful. This is creating life. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't like it, get out of my spa. And then, so spent the day, had a really big lunch, and contractions coming and going and fine. And then that night went to sleep, and Hazel, of course, knew, and we'd been texting all day. And she was living in the Blue Mountains now at this point. And so, midnight, I was like, I reckon she should turn up soon. And so she came, and as did the other fabulous, amazing midwife, who was a local woman as well, Meg Hitchkick, who I sadly don't think is doing midwifery anymore. But they both came, and the room was amazing, and candles, and the birth pool was great. And Hazel hadn't been practicing, I think, for a bit, and so we weren't really sure which birth pool she'd given me. She's like, I tied a ribbon around the broken ones, so here's the good one. And she'd actually done it the other way around. So we had a slow leak on our birth pool, but that was okay. It gave my husband plenty to do with re-inflating and just, fixing it up as we went. And then we were just in and out of the birth pool, and the brief before this labour was me to them, I want you all to push me. When I want to go to hospital, I don't want you to let me go. If I'm asking to get out of it, I don't want you to let me stop. It was as simple as that, I think. And so went laboured through the night, and I'd just done some simple reading this time, and I just latched onto one concept. And that one concept for me this time was to count my breaths, and like in for, I can't even remember what it was, in for 4, out for 7. And I would count that on each of my fingers. And when I got to my middle finger, then I'd know that the next 2 fingers were going to be going downhill. And like I'd be coming out of the contraction.
And then you had a bit of freedom. This is good to hear, because this is what this is a hypnobirthing technique that I've been practicing.
Yeah. And so that was just one simple thing. And also the conscious flopping in the contraction, which is the opposite of what your survival instinct is maybe telling you to do. You tense with the contraction, but it was like to let it go with the contraction, and then the counting. So that was the only 2 things that I did. So that was easy to remember as well. When things get more frenetic, it's like I just have to hold the fingers each one at a time and remember to do that. And and it will be going on the backside. It will get harder, but it will get easier as well. So I really had a rhythm from the start. But again, it really ramped up to that place of full-onness and intensity and hard. And I was like, examine me. And she's like, you don't have to be examined. I'm like, I want an examination. all the time. I want to know exactly where I'm at. And she's like, okay, yeah. And so that's just what I wanted. And it, you know, we were progressing again, regularly happening. And we went through the next day, and a great pain relief thing for me was to, when it all started to get on top of me, she'd be like, okay, right, we're going to get out of the birth pool now. Let's go for a walk down these big stairs and up the stairs, walk around the house, have a cuddle. And then it was so uncomfortable then, and really hurting and everything. But then when you got back into the birth pool, it had its powers back, because you get that feeling of, oh, wow, that immersion and relaxation that washes over you. And, you know, but then when you're in there for an hour or so, that becomes the new normal. So you're able to feel discomfort on top of that. So again, when it would start to get a bit much, we'd just get out of the pool and go for a wander, and then get back in the pool and latch onto that feeling of, calm and good. And then I did start to be like, okay, this is too much. How about I go to hospital and just have a little bit of an epidural? Just a little bit. And they're like, well, no, that's not what you wanted. And you look, baby's okay, you're okay. Let's just go for a little bit longer and see where we're at there. And I was like, oh God, okay, but are you sure? Like, this is the same thing's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And what, you know, and Hayes like, baby's okay, you're okay. We've got progression. Every little bit is counting. It's all happening. I was progressing regularly. I think I got to about 8 centimeters coming onto that evening. And my waters still hadn't broken at this point, and the baby hadn't really come down yet at this point. I'm like, it's the same thing, the baby's not going to come down, and it's the same thing. And then Hazel was like, it's okay. And I didn't know till later, but she had been down in the kitchen with my sister and my husband and being like, yeah, it's looking like the pattern is similar, and we're going to stall at this point, but you know, we'll give it a bit more time, and we really need to push this if this is the last one. And then would come back up to me and be like, no, you're doing great, come on, another walk up and down the stairs. And I lost my mucus plug on the stairs. Well, that was great, that was encouraging. And I was like, can you break my waters for me? Like, I've heard that can move things. And she said, well, that's an intervention, and I don't want to do that intervention, and it's not something that we would. I'm like, I've heard midwives in England do it on one born every minute, and can't you just do it? And she was like, no, that's we're not doing that. And I was like,
love her.
You're so unreasonable. Anyway, I think at one point she caved and was like, okay, you can have a Panadol. And I was like, oh, what a bitch.
You can have a Panadol.
Yeah. And my sister was, meanwhile, she was like sustaining me. So she was giving me jellies and bits of watermelon, and I was being such a bitch to her. And I'm like, it's disgusting, and get away from me. Give me the coconut water. And just like, I'm like so appalled at my behavior. So she was doing the sustenance. My husband was just doing the music and the birth pool and the love and the cuddles and everything. And very much his third labour, like, he was really good at his pep talk by now. Like, he was almost a midwife in some of the things he was saying. And he's very funny as well. He's Irish, and he's just always a clown. So everyone's always laughing at him. Like, the midwives are laughing at him. And of course that's irritating me. And and yeah, so she wouldn't break my waters. And I just remember one point my sister looked at me, and I was like chewing on my nails like a psychopath. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to make my nail really rough, and I'm going to reach in, I'm going to tear open my waters when she's not looking. And she's like, stop it. It's just, what are you doing? Anyway, back in the pool, out of the pool, into the pool, time ticking by. Baby's okay, you're okay. Baby's okay, you're okay. Why would we change things? It's just time. You're doing great. And then, boom, the waters broke, and everyone was like, hooray, that's so great. Right, okay, here we go now. Here we go. It's happening. And I was like, okay, it's happening. And we just had a good rhythm for the contractions and approaching 20 hours again of established labour. So that doesn't count the day of at the pool and walking around and contractions and whatever. But I'm feeling mentally okay after the waters broke. I'm like, yep, that's okay. We can go a bit longer. I definitely went in and out of doubt. And Hazel recalls this. She's like, you didn't believe it until the head was in your hands. You just thought it wasn't going to happen. And whereas she, was seeing all this progression, but I was still like, it's just, I'm going to be what if we're here from hours more and then I'm exhausted and I can't cuddle my baby and I can't do it. I can't do it. Oh, you can, you're okay. Anyway, and then the contractions started to get a bit bigger and she was pointing to my husband about that bit on your back, at your lower back, where you can see the line on the top of the bum crack and it all starting to part and spread and your bum flattens. And she was, and the shape of my anus and everything, and her and my husband just like, casually discussing that. And I didn't give a shit. And just, yep. And then, I wanted him out of the pool, all of the plans of love and in the pool. And I'm like, get out of my pool. This is my pool and it's me. I just don't touch me. And no, I wanted touch. I wanted them holding my hands, both him and my sister holding my hands. I remember that really strong holding. And then the big pushes started to come and Hazel was like, okay, your baby's starting to come down now. And this push is going to, this is what's going to happen. Your body is just, every contraction is moving him closer. So I want you to think about moving your voice into a different register. You're going to move it deeper down into your diaphragm and make those pushes do something, but not as much shouting, just more internal and slow and everything. And you can reach down and feel where your baby's head is. And I could feel this weird little like soft thing inside. And I was like, oh, is that it? Yeah, that's your baby's head. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't, but it can still get stuck though, can't it? It can still not come out because my babies are big and I'm little and it still can get stuck at this point. We're not like, well, it's happening. It's coming. Like, don't think about that. It's okay. And anyway, and then the big push came and the head came out and there was some blood, and I just remember I was yep, okay. And I was like, so tell me everything that's going to happen. Like, what's I think I get very like quite, I want the logical sequence of how these things are going to happen, and so I can control my head and what's happening and whatever clinical speak. That's what I want right now. And Hazel was great. She was just step by step and matter of fact and excellent and great. And then before you know it, my husband and I had this quite a long wait between the next contraction, and we knew that the next contraction was going to birth him. And he was like, I'm just so proud of you, it's so great and I love you. And it was like this cheesiest movie script you can ever, like the worst movie you would ever see. The thing that's so, see you in a minute, baby, is what we said. And I'm like, oh, so embarrassing. And then that last push, and I was on my knees and I was kind of leaning a bit forward, reaching down between my legs, and out it came and up it came and onto my chest. I'm like, oh my baby, oh my God. And then the pool was quite bloody quite quickly, and he was a bit flippy floppy, but I was, I was sort of jostling him around a bit, and the second midwife wanted to come in and slap him around and wake him up, but Hazel was like, no, stay back. Mm-hmm. This moment is so important. Like, this moment is so important. You can give it a few seconds or whatever it was. And then, with a bit of a rub of the towel and whatever, he was fine. He came to. Mm-hmm. And then I reached down and felt my third pair of testicles. I was like, oh, it's a boy.
Oh, yes. Looking to see your baby, yeah.
Yeah, and, and like we had several girls' names
there, but only one boy's name, and that was, so obviously it was the strong one. It was Banjo, and Banjo was here, and it was amazing. And then she's like, there's a bit of blood in the pool, so it was quite bloody. So we'll just get you to stand up, and maybe we'll get you comfortable over here. And in standing up, bloop, out came the placenta.
Cool.
So that was a thing that I was like, oh, then you got to birth the placenta, and that's another whole thing that I've never experienced and whatever. So yeah, boom, out it came, fine, great. And over to the bed that we had set up, and just lying there and just like, wow, oh my God, this is amazing. Wow, I can't believe it. My husband and my sister are like, oh, this is incredible. And then we have this photo. I love this photo so much, of my sister and my husband and the two midwives. And there's just blood everywhere, like a horror film. But they've all got these massive beaming smiles on their faces. It's just like such a hilarious photo because of that. They look like murderers. But it was just great. And then Hazel went to examine me, and I had a bit of tearing, and she was like, yeah, oh, okay. And it's like, I hate to say this, but I could do this, but I don't think I've got that much, whatever they call it, the numbing stuff, lidocaine, or so it's probably something we should transfer for. We could wait until the morning and you have the night with the baby, but then you're likely to be a bit more inflamed and things, and it might be something we want to do now. And I was like, I don't give a shit. This has happened. Great. Okay, whatever. So we went to the hospital in the car, and everyone was just so happy. And we walked into the maternity ward, and all the midwives had known, because the midwife that was the second midwife also worked up at the hospital. And they knew that the labour was happening, and when we walked in with the baby, they just leapt up and gave us this amazing standing ovation, and were like cheering and so happy for us. We were like celebrities. It was just amazing, and I felt so proud and so happy, and so just like everything was right. And then went into the room where the stitcher-upper lady came in and worked away for quite some time. I had a 3rd degree tear, but I didn't care. I had my baby. I had a cup of tea. I was just gas. I was off my head in delirium and happiness and chatting away to everybody. And then we went home and spent the night with the baby. And there was one more little thing, which was Hazel had a massive she monitored me for a while and done everything that she was meant to do, and then went home. And but in the night I got up to go to the toilet, and a big clot dropped out, quite a bit of blood. And then I was like, oh dear, and then I felt a bit faint. I was like, guys, and I started to feel faint, and I knew how tired my husband and my sister were, and I was like, what if I bleed out? Because everyone's asleep, no one's awake enough to watch me. So I was like, yeah, and I was faint. I was like, you need to call an ambulance, I need to go to hospital now. And they're like, what? And I was like, just get an ambulance. I couldn't even talk. So they called an ambulance, and the ambulance came, and they were actually a bit condescending, because they walked into this house with no furniture and 3 people going, with just home birthed, but we need to go to hospital because I'm bleeding. And they were like, really? Oh, and they were a bit condescending compared to all the other everything that had happened. But anyway, so we went back to hospital and then just spent that night. And they were like, no, you're fine. A bit of that is. So we then just slept for a few hours in hospital and went home in the morning. So that was all okay, but I just felt we had to do that. And and then I was up and about the next day, week, but walking around and not sawn in two and just done it. All my previous feelings of, you know, loss of experience and sadness at my birth experience were gone, and they still are, really, apart from when I relive it like I have with you. And it was wonderful, a very different recovery, like a bit uncomfortable with the tearing. I won't play that down too much because it sucks as well. But, you know, I got through it and it was okay, and I wasn't compromised elsewhere on my body, and in a way I didn't want to be. And today, and, you know, a year later, I was completely normal there. I feel lucky about that. I know not everybody has a good recovery there also. But yeah.
And how big was your baby?
4 kilos.
4 kilos. So he was your smallest of all.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think I did anything different really with him.
It sounds like you just had the same kind of labours with all of your babies by the sound of it.
Yeah, it was literally the same. And the only difference with this one was the continuous positive encouragement and the
not transferring as well, because that 2 hours of travel, you know, can slow things down. It can change things, you know, as well.
Exactly. So. Yeah, and just being in that different location, like being close to the hospital geographically meant we all felt more able to push the boundaries. Hazel, comfortable as the midwife in her position, to push me longer. Me, you know, confident that it was just around the corner. I was, you know, happy to be pushed longer as well. And so, and so being able to stay active the whole way through. And the breathing thing, that is really just having that formula for me, for my own way my brain works. Some people like to look at, you know, visual pictures of encouragement or whatever. For me, it was that sort of almost mathematical formula that I could just latch onto.
Well, you know, that was a form of mindfulness. You were basically using a relaxation technique where you were staying in the present moment.
Yeah.
And you were focusing on something rather than thinking about all these other things that could go wrong, or, you know, being distracted by other people and that sort of thing. So that was a really good mindfulness practice that you were doing.
Yeah. And it was definitely a good thing. And I would, if I am ever asked for input from a mother-to-be about labour, that's the thing I kind of tell them that helped me.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all 3 of your stories with us and being raw and honest and open and allowing yourself to open up, especially since you're a more logical person rather than emotional person. I really appreciate you taking the time today. I shared tears with you as you shared tears, and I shared happiness and joy. And I'm so happy for you that you know, eventually had that beautiful birth that you were hoping for from the start.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I do just want to add that I really enjoyed purposefully booking in my postnatal checkup with my original GP. And I, from a point of confidence, calmness, and knowledge, told him how wrong I thought he was in not promoting feedback, and statistically told him that it was the far less riskier practice what I had done, and I so good doing that.
Oh, that's nice. A bit of healing at the end, and a little bit of education for the GP.
Yeah, sorry, obstetrician.
Yeah. Yes, GP/obstetrician, yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sasha.
Thank you. Thank you. What a privilege to speak about this really important thing. Thanks for allowing me to.
My pleasure. Hey, me again. I just wanted to let you know that I've just created a brand new Facebook group called VBAC Home Birth Support Group, where you can connect with other like-minded mothers who are looking to have a VBAC home birth as well. You can find the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for listening to the VBAC Home Birth Stories podcast. I hope that this episode has helped you take another step to finding your voice and confidence in your VBAC journey. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more women to find out more about VBAC home birth, just like you. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it to your Instagram stories, and tag me at the Motherhood Circle. See you next week.